Hello, 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 and I'm so happy to see you all here after lunch. And don't worry, I won't force you to move yourself or do stuff like that because I would consider that trap, especially as it's involving physical activity, like going to the stage, hopefully not stumbling. I hope I won't stumble today, another trap. But the main trap I noticed when seeing my slide is, well, at least the little slide before said like common E to E. Pitfall traps in testing. And I was like, okay, didn't I hand it in a talk for general testing stuff? Well, I can do that if you want me to, but I was like, okay, maybe use this trap for asking the audience if they want to have a talk on all the things I did wrong on testing or all the things I did wrong in E2E testing. So to warm you up a little bit, let's quickly go to Slido. I have a small QR code on there, and the code, if you go to slido.com, is testing trap. Big surprise. But I would love to know, yeah, would you like to have a general collection of all the bad choices I did in my life? Okay, let's focus it on testing because we don't want to be here for, like, I guess, the complete day. Even if I love that you're here, so I'm so happy to see you, but yeah, I will be mindful on your time. Yeah. Ooh, it's like hat your hat. Spill the tea. Oh my God, you want to have a confession? I see it, I see it. Ooh. Let's wait a little bit longer. We have here a decent amount of participants. And I see the numbers are not changing that much. So, okay, let's screw the E2E one and go for a general one. Thank you. And while I will do a little confession on all the bad choices, all the worst things I encountered in testing, maybe you want to share your pitfalls too. So if you want, please keep it open or please open this Slido at any point in time. And if you want to confess your biggest mistake in testing, and maybe we can talk about later on, I would be so happy and I wouldn't feel like an idiot because I know there are other people who do the same things as I do. So I wouldn't feel so lonely. Okay, great. But without further ado, let's go back to the non-Cypress version. Great. So, okay, let's pretend that didn't happen. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see you at code.talks here and that you all came to me and want to listen to everything I did wrong in my life. Well, just testing. So don't be worried. I won't talk about my whole life. I will talk about testing. And I know it sounds harsh if I say I screwed up. But well, I hope at least you can learn from my mistakes a little bit, or at least we all feel connected and all feel connected in the bad, nightmarish world of testing. So before that, real quick, my name is Ramona. I'm working as a software engineer at the Shopware AG, which is a company providing an open source e-commerce platform. But besides that, I seemingly love to talk on conferences. So I became a Google Developer Expert in web technologies, a Cypress ambassador, and a Woman Tech Maker ambassador. And yeah, enough about me, let's get started. Because there's one random fact about me I'd like to share with you. And I guess due to the fact that you choose to go to a conference in a cinema, I guess you have, you like cinemas, hopefully. And I do, I'm a huge movie nerd since I was a child, basically. And I was brought by my father inside of cinema, like, I guess, since I was, yeah, basically able to see some children's cinema movies and stuff. In my childhood, there was one franchise which meant a lot to me. And hopefully, maybe you can raise your hand if there are some other Star Wars nerds here. Ooh, wonderful. So yeah, it was Star Wars. And as I'm an adult now, I rewatched this movie, like, I don't want to say how much times I rewatched it because it could lead to the impression I waste my time, but it's no waste of time. Because there are some learnings which I took with me, and some learnings you can apply to testing too. So there's especially one quote from the 1983 Star Wars film, it's episode 6, Return of the Jedi, which stuck inside of my mind, and you might have guessed it by seeing the title of my talk. It's a trap. And don't worry, I won't mimic it enough, because I know it's cringe, but I just couldn't help it. I love it. So it's a quote which was said by Admiral Akbar in the Battle of Endor, basically. Admiral Akbar, who is the leader of the Mon Calamari rebels, tries to basically ambush the Death Star, or basically mobilize its forces in a concerted effort to destroy the Death Star. And encounters an unexpected ambush there, leading him to this exclaim, "It's a trap." Well, I guess it's a quote you stumbled upon in the internet in your life at some point. However, you might wonder now, what does it have to do with testing? And in my head, it makes sense because it's a wonderful allegory when it comes to testing. Well, testing has many perks and advantages. It gives you security, it gives you confidence, it gives you like a challenge of your own assumptions. I am not sure if I really need to tell you that. However, all these values can be outshadowed though by pain points caused by various reasons basically. So it can feel like that if you do testing, that it is like an ambush, things you did in your best intent, but turn out to be painful in the long run, or even earlier. Well, when it comes to myself and my experience, there are 3, which, well, I don't want to be like harsh, but which really make me hate testing sometimes. First, it's slow tests. And, well, sometimes I used to be a little impatient, and I don't like to wait for my pull request to be merged, especially if there's time pressure involved in my daily doing, which can happen at the best companies, I guess. If you want to release a feature, you want to release it quick, but you want to release it wonderful. Yeah. The second one, where I need to blame my former self sometimes, it's tests which are painful to maintain. So let's raise your hands. Did you ever experience the feeling that you hated your past self? Like, what did I do there? Thank you so much. I don't feel like an idiot. But yeah, sometimes I really hate my past self for doing old stuff, doing complicated, outdated stuff, or just thought, okay, I did it in my best intent, but I have no idea what I was doing, especially months later. But it's still not the worst thing what happens, at least in my experience. It's this one, the end boss of bad testing. Tests who give you no value at all because they have no clear results. You can call them flaky. You could call them highs and fails, like the Heisen bug, which only occurs if you look away, if you don't debug, if you don't measure. Everything looks fine. But if you go to CI, for example, your test is breaking like every 3 times, and you have no idea why, and you want to throw your computer out of the window and just go there and be a gardener. Well, nightmare fuel, I know, but I wouldn't be here talking to you on a conference if there's nothing to do about it, right? So let's take a look how I tackled it, or at least how I tried to get better in avoiding all the things I did wrong. So I know the first point, if I say the word mindset, nobody wants to know, like, it's a mindset thing, nobody knows. But in this case, look at this situation first. You build your feature, you do your task, you are full of production code when it comes to your headspace. And you have no power, no headspace for additional complexity, which is basically, I guess, the default in our everyday business. And in this case, I don't have any headspace, especially for testing, right? So if tests eat up too much headspace, it could cause even teams to abandon it, which is pretty bad. So avoiding tests to be really complicated, to feel like a burden, is our first priority. Well, and this is solved by the most important thing in testing, in my opinion. And I guess it was Joni Goldberg in his JavaScript testing guidelines he have. I guess they are on GitHub. He described this, like tackling of this, as a golden rule in his best practices. Tests should be designed plain simple in any case. It doesn't matter what test you're writing. If it's a unit test, it's an integration test, contract test, whatever. Keep it simple, stupid. Like we should do with our own production code too. And the goal behind that is that, imagine you open your test, you look at it, and you know exactly, and in the first blink, what it does and what it intends. So you don't need to think about it, right? Therefore, a flat test design is pretty important. So test only as much as you need it. And this one is an interesting take because it contradicts a little bit clean code, but you should use as few abstractions as possible, even if it leads to duplicates. So maybe we can discuss that later on inside of the hallway track or something, because I would love to hear your opinion on that one. Well, as I said, when it comes to clean code, test code, you should treat it with the same care as your production code, of course. However, some stuff is not suitable for it. So like duplication, as I said, and yeah, try to think of simplicity first. So don't worry, that was the only mindset thing. We will dive into code like in a bit, and we will start with unit or a little bit component testing. I use Jest for my examples here right now when it comes to unit testing. However, I try to be as agnostic as possible. So you can apply them to other frameworks too. And if not, let's talk about that. So let's look at this little test. I shortened it a little bit to make it visually more appealing, but it gets my point. Well, the test should check the behavior that an error is given if a deprecated property isn't used. In this case, only the title here is important, so don't worry. When looking at this title only and you have no concept whatsoever, for example, if you go to CI, to your CI service, and look inside of the logs and see it failing, do you know what it wants to accomplish? Do you know what happens inside of your application if you only see should throw error? If you can, and it's not your own test, respect, but at least I wouldn't know what exactly it means if such a test would fail, right? So remember our golden rule. You should know instantly what it's doing. So let's introduce the three-part rule on how to write good test titles to save you a little time when it comes to debugging. So it's by Roy Osheroff, and it will help you keeping clear what you want to cover with the test and what to accomplish. And I guess this is completely surprising. It contains some three parts. The first, what is being tested? It's the property here. The second one, under what circumstances is it tested? So the usage of the deprecated property, for example. So like here. And last but not least, what is the expected result of the test? So what should it accomplish? Well, pretty obvious, an error is thrown. And if you read a title like that, I guess it gives you more clues what is going wrong with your application, right? At least for other people who didn't write the test themselves. Yeah, test name is long. And Longcat likes long test names because you can see the result of the test in first sight. Fewer search and no need to read through all the logs or going deeper sometimes. Okay. Next step, look at this test. Do you see and get it in first sight? Well, if you did, congrats, and I think you're pretty awesome. However, if you didn't, like I didn't, it's completely normal because the test structure is a mess. Like all the declaration, all the assertion, it's all over the place without any structure. So in general, this component test should test the usage of a context menu component. So for example, if you have a little entry inside of a list and you want to edit it, delete it, and have a little small context menu in it. But yeah, how should you know? So how can we get this test to be more readable, more easier, more well structured? And this is basically one little pattern, which is, I guess, fairly common when it comes to unit testing. It's called arrange, act, assert. And again, I have the feeling that people thinking about testing pattern like the rule of three. But again, it's like you should structure your test in 3 parts. The first is the arrange part. So there you have all the setup to bring the system to the status you want to test. So may it be array variables, may it be stopping, mocking, everything you need to get the scenario going. Next one, act. Actions. Do all the steps you want to do to get to your result state. So may it be a click in a component test, may it be, whatever. Like everything you need to do to get to the point where you want to do the assertion, which is the third part. Assert. Self-explanatory, I guess. Do the assertions and checks of your test scenario. And I guess in this case, it's pretty easy to see, okay, what is the content of the test? What do you want to do with this test without like thinking too much about it? Remember a golden rule. But wait, I'm not sure if arrange, act, assert can be applied to any test, even when it comes to the small unit testing cases we have, because let's think about the example of a context menu. You need to do a click, then the little menu will appear, and then you can do the click for the menu entry. So what happens if the test automation is faster than a user? And the menu is not open yet if it wants to click. So you need to do some assertions on the DOM, right? Sometimes we need to assert before progressing with the tests. So it's technically asserting before acting. So arrange, act, assert is not too fitting. But it's not a problem at all. So let's take a look at the AAA pattern at the following perspective. The first one. Everything which we arranged in our test, it's basically what we're giving in the scenario, like starting. Second one, if we act in our tests, the action part, it's, here we see the action basically, and it's when something happens. Pretty easy, right? And last but not least, asserting. Here we find the things we want to assert, the intent of the test. So basically, then this is what I'm happening. And if we highlight some little words inside of it, we see the following. Given when then. Well, given when then pattern is a pattern derived from BDD, behavior-driven development. I'm sure some people heard of it, but it's not that bad if you didn't, because you can use it without BDD. Because it can be applied like similar as the arrange, act, assert pattern to your test to structure it. Let's go for the same test. And you see the given one is there when we had all the arrange parts. Then we will use a little bigger when part here, where we do all the prerequisites and with the small assertion on the context menu if it's opened or not. So with a little assert in it. And last but not least, the then part with the actual assert, which will reflect the result of our test. Yep. Still a well-structured and better test when it comes to unit ones. Okay. I have some more traps when it comes to unit testing. However, I need to fit the time frame, so I guess I need to proceed a little bit. Too small, finally, Cypress end-to-end testing. And even if I said, like, let's spill the tea on all of my mistakes, sometimes I think end-to-end testing is more prone to pitfall traps, so I really wanted to include it a little bit. So, and I guess it's just like the nature of things, because if you have a robot, a computer, and automation mimicking a person, you need the complete application stack present, which leads to more potential errors. And of course, many possibilities of ambush or traps. So let's take a look. My first one. I wanted to picture a little situation as a little image. So, well, basically, it looks peaceful and happy, two people sharing one paper and holding it. And it's data on it. Well, connect this image to your test. The two people representing tests, so like This is a test, and this is the test. And the paper representing the test data, which is really important in ETE tests because you need to have some data to work on, to have the complete workflow present. Yeah. And this can be pretty bad when it comes to testing because like they are sharing the test data, right? So they can influence one another, which can lead to pretty heavy debugging failures, nightmare fuel, you know, you name it. Or worst, even two tests relying on one another. Much fun debugging that. Especially as this will cause side effects. It can lead you to have flaky tests. So like sometimes it failed, sometimes it passed, and sometimes you want to just go back to sleep. May it be the data gets corrupted beforehand or whatever. So you really need to make sure that your tests are not reliant on one another, can be executed in a random order, and try to get away from side effects. And trying to get away from that is not that difficult, actually, as you see here. It's basically a little abstract of an end-to-end test, which is basically testing the customer login. So you have a customer, it logs in into an online shop and does its things. But before I'm doing basically anything, I want to basically set my system back to the initial state. So I have a shared test base, which is always the same. And everything which could cause side effect will be basically thrown out of the window. And afterwards, because of course it is a clean installation then, I will create the test data I need specifically for the test I need. May it be API-wise, if it's an API-first or headless application, or in MySQL dump, or using Faker, you name it. There are a couple of ways, but I guess this is space for another talk, so I will just digress. Just try to use your test, even if it's end-to-end testing, just as in a pretty encapsulated area and yeah, avoid the side effects. Well, for the next test trap, I brought a little guest, like BB8. And BB8 is pretty clueless because he found a name inside of your tests, which he cannot deal with. Like, he doesn't know what it is. It's foobar. I guess many of you guys know this little placeholder because it's pretty handy, it's pretty common, it's like used like everywhere. But however, if you see foobar, do you know if it's a t-shirt? Do you know if it's a product, a customer, if first name, a second name? Nobody knows. So even if we as developer know that it's a common placeholder, the next person reading the test might not know what the test is about. Thus, he needs or she needs to think about it. And it's set space. Yeah. Again, we don't want to have the tests more difficult to understand. So what should we do about it? Pretty easy. We should use realistic naming, like I did, for example, in this little product CRUD test, like creating a product, and naming it like a product. For example, using T-shirt Akbar for the T-shirt name, or manufacturer space company. I don't know. I don't want to be creative right now. But you could use Faker. You could use even a dump of some customer installation if it's okay when it comes to data security and stuff. But yeah, there are a couple of ways to make your test realistic and everyone knows what it's about if they read it. New tab, same test. Like, it's still the CRUD one, but you see the selectors here. And now you might say, like, okay, it's a unique selector, it's just some CSS, what should be wrong with that one? Well, think about the application itself. If you refactor it, if you do some more styling, introduce more classes, or remove ones, your test will fail. And it won't fail because of an error, just because it's outdated. And a test failing without a bug is false negative, giving no reliable report on your application, because it's still working right. So if only your implementation changed, you should really take care of not testing implementation details. And there are a couple of ways to avoid that, but I just cover the low-hanging fruit here. You need to mind your selectors. So instead of going for CSS classes, for example, please think about going to text or strings or any snippets a user would see. And another advantage of that is that it's actually the way a user would use your application, because, oh, there's a text, I will read it. Oh, there's a text, I will click it. it's pretty near the user. But of course, translations or snippets can change too, so maybe think about using data selectors. Because, yeah, you need some documentation so that every one of your colleagues know that this data CUI for Cypress, for example, is meant for testing, but the fellow developers won't change it because they know, okay, it's meant for testing. Okay, last but not least, this is a topic I cannot stress enough, and I guess my colleague here in the crowd will be like, oh my god, she's talking about it again. But you cannot believe how much I need to say that in my pull request if I'm a reviewer. So, this one is a fixed waiting time. Maybe a sleep, maybe a CY wait, like it's doing here. And it's even used in a custom command, which is a command which is basically executed in almost every test actually, and we will always wait this 500 milliseconds here, no matter if it's needed or not, which leads to the best case, our test will be slow because we don't need to wait that long. But in the worst case, if our test will have like more load because the resources it gave in their job was like just a little weaker, I don't know, and we don't wait enough time, the test will fail and it will be flaky because, yeah, just some bad luck, right? So debugging those things are pretty bad. So please don't ever use fixed waiting times. Please don't. Just please don't. And fortunately, there are a couple of ways to achieve that. First one, basically all will wait on waiting dynamically, but the first one is actually waiting for stuff which happens inside of UI. May it be a loading spinner which is appearing and disappearing again. May it be some element rendering. May it be basically any change you can see in the styling or whatever. You can assert on that one. Many test automation frameworks, like Cypress or Playwright, will already have routines for that. Or what I really like, if you have an API first, or at least some API inside of your application and some requests which are fired against it, wait for their responses, like here. I really like to use this because it's pretty accurate. It doesn't need to wait for rendering if I don't need to. And yeah, of course, we can argue that it's basically API testing I'm doing right here. But if it's an API-driven application, I don't think it's a problem. Okay. So, coming back to Admiral Akbar, the Battle of Endor turned out to be a success. Of course, it wasn't easy. There was lots of teamwork needed and a couple of countermeasures. But if you refer that to testing, it's the same. Like having stable tests, having maintainable tests, and avoiding flakiness might be a little difficult, especially if you have a legacy application and you need to rewrite them. But it's worth it in the end, because it will make you easier to write tests. It will decrease the headspace you need to use for testing. Because remember a golden rule. And this is basically the most important thing I want you to remember from my talk. Like, a test should be a friendly assistant to you, not a hindrance. It shouldn't feel like solving a mathematical formula to you. And maybe, like RTD2 is doing here right now, he's catching bugs with these. I hope we can all do the same. And so like that, dealing with tests will feel like fun and like an assistant and not like the worst thing I ever did in my life. I don't want to be convinced to become a gardener just because of testing, right? So yeah. What about you guys? Let's see if there are some small answers to my little poll here. Flaky tests. Oh yeah. I feel that one too so much. Using a tool without parallelization, yeah, it's so damn heavy to build oneself. I feel that. And testing implementation details. Oh, it looks so great to see that so many people have the same pains as I did. And I guess looks like, yeah, I should do a talk on mocking maybe. Wonderful, making assumptions, stability, do testing in the first place. Ooh, hot take, I like that. But it's wonderful to see that we have so many people with pretty similar, can I scroll it down a little bit? Or zoom out a little bit? I don't know. But it's really wonderful to see So thank you so much, people, that we are basically at a similar place in testing. I basically cannot say anything else than really thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm open for questions here. I will be at the conference basically somewhere. And if you cannot catch me again, please reach out to me on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, wherever you find me. Thank you so much.